What does the future look like in a world without hope? Can a society let go of its dark past and embrace something better? How does an evolving world change its people? And how can we rekindle the humanity of a world that's long since left it behind? Over the years, countless sci-fi stories have attempted to answer these questions, with our evolving relationships to technology and society giving rise to visions that range from utopian paradises to crumbling dystopias. And though many of these stories have aged as our own world continues to advance, there's one that feels just as iconic today as when it was first released almost 50 years ago. Premiering in December of 1982, Katsuhiro Otomo's Akira is a legendary work of science fiction, distilling half a century's hopes and fears into one neon-soaked, tech-laden, haunting vision of the future, with the nation of Japan teetering on the edge of apocalypse. And in the 43 years since its debut, the series has built a towering legacy of its own, pioneering the cyberpunk genre, popularizing manga for Western audiences, and revolutionizing anime through an equally iconic film adaptation. But despite its decades of success and transformation into a mega franchise, the hope and dread at the heart of Akira feel more real than ever today. Here I will explore its creator's many influences, the real-world history used to fuel its apocalypse, and its hopeful journey of reclaiming our humanity from an inhuman world. This is the story of Katsuhiro Otomo's Akira, and the horror and beauty of an uncertain future. The path to Akira begins all the way back in 1979, when Otomo, already an experienced manga artist, released Fireball, a sci-fi horror series following a resistance force fighting to survive in a city of ruthless police, invasive technology, and psychic soldiers. Sound familiar? Unfortunately, the series was plagued by a lack of story planning, with Otomo later abandoning the series before completing it, claiming he'd grown tired of it by his 20th page. Luckily, the artist would iterate on Fireball's themes across other works, leading to an offer from the publisher Kodansha to write a series for their new manga feature, Young Magazine. And though the original pitch for the series was comprised of 10 chapters, Otomo's newly focused project quickly expanded into a sprawling epic, with the creator incorporating his own childhood memories and elements of Japanese history to inform this vision of the future. The Akira story gradually ballooned in size as I wrote it, but I had the basic plot outline from the start, Otomo recounts. I wanted to draw this story set in a Japan similar to how it was after the end of World War II. Rebelling government factions, a rebuilding world, foreign political influence, an uncertain future, a bored and reckless younger generation racing each other on bikes. I also wanted to depict the later Showa period, recreate the assorted elements that built this era, and craft an exciting story that would seem believable enough in reality. Akira is the story of my own teenage years, rewritten to take place in the future. The ideas naturally flowed out from my own memories. Beginning in 1992, Akira opens with a haunting vision of Japan devastated by a new kind of bomb, engulfing Tokyo in an all-consuming void before jumping into the near future of 2030, as a gang of teen bikers led by Shotaro Kaneda speed through the streets of Neo-Tokyo, a towering metropolis built atop the ruins of old Japan. But after a run-in with a strange child leaves his friend Tetsuo injured, Kaneda and his gang the Capsules are slowly pulled into a war between Japan's authoritarian government and an army of would-be revolutionaries, with both factions scrambling to control a growing race of psychic warriors and a mysterious figure named Akira. Given how much of the story was inspired by Otomo's childhood in Japan post-World War II, it makes sense that this cultural makeup is also reflected through Akira's aesthetics and world building. Following the devastation of Hiroshima and Nagasaki through the atomic bombs, as well as several firebombing campaigns, Japan was occupied by the US military until 1952, with America spearheading a reconstruction effort in the hopes of rehabilitating Japan into an economic ally. This meant not only facilitating a new post-war economy for the nation, but rebuilding Japan's urban centers and civilian homes, over half of which had been leveled or burned during the bombings. And it worked, arguably too well. The outbreak of the Korean War in 1950 made Japan into a central supply depot for UN forces, and the nation's forced demilitarization pushed its industries away from war weapons and into electronics and manufacturing, leading to a tech boom that also gave Japan one of the strongest economies in the world. But this rapid growth brought problems of its own. While the economic boom brought global expansion for the nation's corporate giants, labor unions and workers steadily lost their power, with the outcome of the Great Miike Strike in 1960 heralding a new level of class divide in Japan. Of course, the collision of high-tech and low-life is a core element of cyberpunk fiction, and thanks to Otomo's detailed, grungy aesthetics, his love of lived-in, clunky machinery, and his own memories of post-war Japan, it also saturates the world of Akira. Neo-Tokyo is a Frankenstein city bursting at the seams with different influences, heightening the neon-dotted streets of 1980s Tokyo while homaging everything from the cityscapes of Howling Metal to the light cycles of Disney's Tron. And Otomo's eye for detail can be seen in everything from the story's environments and hardware to each of its main characters, giving a sense of heft and realism to every element on page. While Neo-Tokyo definitely feels removed from our own reality, everything is designed in a way that feels functional and natural. And even though this kaleidoscopic mishmash of tech, design, and urban life can feel thrilling, Otomo's designs also highlight the ugliness of a world overrun with industry. The sleek, ordered buildings of the city's downtown give way to crowded slums choked by cables and vents, hinting at how this government sees its people, extensions of the technology that surrounds them. Dependable, but disposable. Meanwhile, the networks of sewers and tunnels that run through the city have become home to a resistance movement, poised to tear down the government's authoritative rule, while the neglect of public services like education and social services have led to the rise of gangs like Kaneda's, venting their anger through violent street fights. Though Otomo has stated in several interviews that his story was shaped by his childhood memories rather than any defined political agenda, the commentary of the story is still crystal clear. A future that neglects its people can never really last, no matter how advanced it may seem. In its relentless mission to shape its future, this Japan has built a society that's consumed itself from the inside out. And as a result, Neo-Tokyo is about to explode. Across any medium, post-apocalyptic fiction is usually framed inside stories of empowerment, usually by setting the resilience of the human spirit against the breakdown of society, and ending with a group of survivors setting out to rebuild the world. By contrast, Akira is all about the subversion of this fantasy, starting with a fully rebuilt society whose imperfect foundations lead to an even bigger disaster. A lot of this can be attributed to the series' production, which evolved as its massive popularity let Otomo retool it from a 10-chapter miniseries into a sprawling epic, complete with a massive stable of characters. And as you'd expect, this sprint to meet demand only skyrocketed the series' profile even further, prompting Otomo to hire multiple assistants to help balance the ever-increasing workload, including future animation legend Satoshi Kon. Elaborating on this evolution, Otomo would state, "It became successful pretty quickly. The first volume sold 300,000 copies in its initial printing, and by the time production began on the anime, the manga was running on a weekly schedule. In other words, we drew 20 pages a week. I brought on a second assistant to help with this, occasionally enlisting a third just to handle the screen tone work. When the manga deadline drew near, we'd pull several all-nighters, then I'd walk right into the anime studio the day after. I figured at first I'd wrap up the story in a single volume, so I wrote a 2-page synopsis with that in mind and thought I'd have it done in 6 months. Just like what happened with Domu though, new ideas and problems immediately came up and expanded the story and backdrop. Personally, I think it's pointless to try and cram an entire plot of 8 years worth of manga into a single synopsis, mainly because that's a lot of information to drop at once, and I don't want to end up like Tetsuo.
Leave me alone!
But also because I think Akira's scope and execution are just as important as the plot itself. While Kaneda remains our POV character throughout the series, directly or indirectly tying the major events together, Akira's cast quickly grows into a massive ensemble, with every major and supporting character sorted into several major factions. The youth biker gangs led by Kaneda and his rivals in the Clowns, the forces of the new Japanese government, largely enforced by the uncompromising Colonel Shikishima, and symbolized through increasingly authoritative technology, and the resistance seen through Kei, her brother Ryu, the rising politician Nezu, and their fanatical alliance with the cult of Lady Miyako. But unlike a lot of more conventional dystopian fiction, which can sometimes have cut-and-dry heroes and villains, Akira only leans further into shades of gray as it unfolds. This isn't a battle between right and wrong, but two different approaches to rebuilding a nation, both of which begin to crumble under the weight of a future that's grown beyond their control. The Colonel's devotion to militarized science quickly unravels as the obsessions of his lead scientist and the secret activities of the Espers compromise the Akira project, forcing him to declare martial law and use weapons of mass destruction to keep order. Meanwhile, Lady Miyako's grander plans are sabotaged through Nezu and his own failed coup, with him betraying the resistance and nearly killing Kei and Kaneda. And as the breakdown of this dystopian society unfolds, the parallels between the two factions only become more apparent, with both weaponizing symbols of the future like the Espers in a desperate bid to gain control of Akira, revealed to have ties to the bombing of old Japan. But maybe the ultimate product of this broken world is the character of Tetsuo, whose emerging psychic abilities and long-simmering rage turn him into a wild, destructive force. And though this starts small, with Tetsuo taking over the clowns to satisfy his drug habit, his powers quickly become their own form of addiction, totally subsuming his humanity. A violent confrontation with the capsules turns his friendship with Kaneda into a brutal rivalry, and his brief alliance with Shikishima only focuses his cruelty and ambition, setting him after Akira in the hopes of gaining even more power. These many threads finally come together in a secret base under Neo-Tokyo's Olympic Stadium, where Tetsuo's rampage brings him face to face with Akira, revealed to be an immensely powerful psychic child whose power caused the destruction of old Japan. And though I think the story drags a little after this reveal, basically spending a whole volume playing musical chairs with the child, the harrowing note Otomo leaves us on at the series' halfway point speaks volumes. The shadow of the atomic bomb hangs over the entire series, imbuing Akira and his power with a kind of all-encompassing dread. And if Akira represents the devastation of the bomb, then the mad scramble to control him and his fellow psychics becomes Otomo's analog for the post-war arms race, a series of greedy mistakes that will cost lives and, inevitably, doom the world again. Both Shikishima and Nezu use the panic of Akira's escape to seize control, turning the streets of Neo-Tokyo into a war zone and claiming countless lives. And through one of these acts of violence, we're given a haunting reminder of the truth in a post-nuclear world. No matter how much we advance, how much we build to reassert ourselves, all of it can be wiped away with the smallest of actions. Despite how much it draws from Japan's history, I would argue the key factor in Akira's popularity lies in the universal appeal of its messaging. Japan may have been the only nation to feel the devastation of the bomb firsthand, but the fear of atomic destruction only grew in the decades since its use, with the Cold War and atomic arms race giving every global superpower the ability to cause untold destruction with the push of a button. And just as Neo-Tokyo was influenced by countless cultures, Akira's story speaks to every nation's fears, namely that, despite decades of uneasy peace, the weapons of the past will return to eradicate our future. It's a bleak, devastating point to linger on, with the societal neglect of Neo-Tokyo's leadership recreating the apocalypse of its past. But with this imperfect, divided society wiped away, Otomo's story sets the stage for one last battle for Japan's future, giving the people of Neo-Tokyo one last chance to change or die. In the wake of its second apocalypse, Neo-Tokyo is left in ruins, with the government's more manageable dystopia giving way to the Great Tokyo Empire, a fierce dictatorship ruled over by Tetsuo and Akira and overrun by a growing number of psychics who have been forcibly awakened and weaponized into service. All the while, we see the same corruption that destroyed Neo-Tokyo reflected in the wider world, with several superpowers trying and failing to co-opt the human weapons that have taken over the nation. And though it's worth repeating that Otomo built his story on broader themes without a clear agenda, you can still see the echoes of Japan's post-war trauma through this nightmarish climax and its effects on the cast, who are left disillusioned or galvanized into undoing this hopeless future. Despite the massive change in setting, the Great Tokyo Empire shares a lot with Neo-Tokyo's old government, with the powerful few lording over the many through a force that they can never fully understand or control. And for all he hopes to represent, Tetsuo is still a product of his own shortcomings, with his escalating powers turning him into a literal war machine who's only satisfied by bigger and bigger acts of violence. Oh yeah, he also blasts a chunk out of the moon. People are definitely gonna be mad about that. Of course, this illusion of control rapidly fails over the book's last volume, with Otomo using Akira's empty throne as a visual motif for this runaway future. Nobody is in control here. Not Tetsuo, nor his violent subjects, nor the other empires bent on acquiring Akira, or even Akira himself. And as these forces start to collide over the series' climax, Otomo's grander message becomes clear. A future worth living in won't be built by any weapon, but by the human connection we all have to embrace to save each other. Across the Empire's rise and fall, Otomo steadily reintroduces the rest of his broader cast, with some like Shikishima and Ryu grappling with their parts in the world they helped create. But unlike the growing chaos of the Empire and Tetsuo himself, we get to see these former enemies brought together through their shared loss and desire to save whatever they can. And though this initially manifests through Lady Miyako, who's revealed to be an Esper herself, Otomo quickly broadens this dynamic through the many reunions throughout the final volume, with each character's transformation building a larger picture of a nation finally moving beyond the violence of its past. The survivors of the Capsule and Clown gangs end up rallying behind Kaneda, abandoning their petty feuds to save what's left of Neo-Tokyo. Kei's empathy for others manifests through her own powers as a psychic medium, elevating her into a force powerful enough to rival Tetsuo. Both Miyako and Shikishima set aside their past agendas, giving what power they have left in the service of their people. Even Akira is able to reassert his own humanity over his power, absorbing the destruction of Tetsuo's final meltdown. And though the investment Otomo makes in each character helps us feel each loss, Akira also ends with a renewed sense of hope for the future as our survivors ride off into a new Japan, fragile and uncertain, but finally free to build its own future. Naturally, Akira's scope, style, and themes brought massive success over its 8-year run, winning it 4 Eisners, a Harvey, a Kodansha Manga Award, and helping to build a franchise that still resonates with audiences today. A lot of this greater appeal can be traced back to its 1988 film adaptation, directed by Otomo and released 6 years into the series' production. And though the film acts as an incredibly abbreviated version of the manga's story, cutting most of the series' subplots and characters, it proved iconic enough to impact pop culture worldwide, helping popularize anime for Western audiences and inspiring countless homages across film and TV. It also helps that it's really cool to look at, with Otomo's eye for detail shining through in everything from the film's incredible uses of light and shadow to its vibrant, moody colors and fluid, detailed animation. But despite the enduring popularity of the film, along with international re-releases for the manga through Epic Comics and Dark Horse, many of the series' high-profile adaptations have stalled out, which I'm sure is a huge bummer for Taika Waititi. No, seriously, look it up. Despite this, I think the enduring legacy Akira has built in the 4 decades since its debut speaks for itself, and the timeless power of its message. Oftentimes, the future can feel like a foregone conclusion, a hopeless vision that we're powerless to stop. But we have always been far more resilient, far more powerful than we could ever truly know. By remembering the losses of the past and embracing the strength we find in each other, we can manifest the power to break the patterns of history, the courage to venture into the unknown, and find the beauty in a tomorrow we shape together. Hey everyone, thanks for checking out today's video and following me into something that's a bit outside what I usually cover. While I don't talk much about anime or manga on the channel, Akira's been one of my favorite comics for years, and it was great to finally sit down, dig into what I love about it, and find all the ways it stayed powerful and relevant through the decades. Let me know if you'd like me to cover more anime or manga in the future, because I've also wanted to talk about Ghost in the Shell for a really long time. Seriously, I want to make that happen. If you like this video, please feel free to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Every little bit helps the channel out a lot. I'd also like to give a special thanks to Carol Ann Brenneman, The Comics Cave, and my patrons, who are helping me to grow this channel and continue doing what I love, and hopefully what you love too. Until next time, stay safe, stay healthy, and remember, It's up to us to build a better tomorrow.